The Leafs have made some big moves following Timothy Lilejegren going down on the long-term IR with an injury. So we're going to break that down in this episode of Leafs Digest, as well as Sheldon Keefe and Ryan Reaves have called out the players because of their lack of response of the Marchand hit on Lilejegren. So you're going to want to stay tuned. We have a lot to break down today. But before we do, make sure to hit the subscribe button. You notice a lot of you guys who are watching right now, a big percentage are not subscribed. So go down and check. We are on the road to 4,500 subscribers, and it would mean the world if you could hit that button if you aren't already. We are uploading 1 to 2 Leafs videos a day, so just a quick reminder, and let's just get right into the video. I won't waste any more of your time as the Leafs are making some moves. So we have a lot of updates to get into today, tons of stuff to discuss, and let's start with the big update that dropped recently from Elliotte Friedman, and is an update on Timothy Lilejegren that is promising and also a little bit unfortunate at the same time. So the update is Timothy Lilejegren has a high ankle sprain. Given the circumstances, this isn't the worst case scenario, as a lot of people thought, including myself, he may have had a fractured ankle, a broken ankle, he might be out for the season, but he only has a high ankle sprain, which is decent. Obviously, the hit on Brad Marchand was very, some people say it was dirty, some people say it was unintentional. Regardless, the Leafs did not respond to the Brad Marchand hit, and the players called him out for that, which we'll discuss later in the video, so stay tuned for that. But his injury is not super severe, but it also isn't great as he's down with a high ankle sprain. And with Timothy Lilejegren on the long-term IR, the Leafs had to make some moves, calling up Simon Benoit and Max Lajoie to the team. Now, this is very interesting if you are the Maple Leafs. We're going to break down both of these guys, and if you checked out our earlier video, you would notice that the Leafs could potentially, and Brad Treliving might be open to making a trade for a guy to replace these two, especially depending how long Timothy Lilejegren is out for. We also have Jake McCabe, who's down, so those are two key guys that are down. However, when discussing a couple of these guys, so Lajoie is not someone to get super excited about. Simon Benoit is a guy who could potentially, he's more NHL caliber, he's more NHL ready. He hasn't been phenomenal the past couple of seasons, but he is a guy who could potentially slot in and at least give you some serviceable ice time, some serviceable minutes for Sheldon Keefe. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Benoit, we can get into it now just a little bit because he's a very interesting guy. So looking at his stats here, last season with the Anaheim Ducks, he played in 78 games, 10 points, and he was a top 4 guy for the Ducks last season. But the Ducks were a horrible team and were debatably the worst defensive team in the last 20 years. So don't put too much stock into that, him being in the top 4. He probably won't slop in the top 4 anytime soon or anytime with the Toronto Maple Leafs, but he's at least a guy who has NHL experience. He wasn't horrible with the Ducks. He's a decent guy. He's physical. He's big body. He's a physical guy who could potentially shake it up for the Maple Leafs. We've discussed in the past, like guys like Nikita Zadorov, that the Leafs could be targeting in a trade. The Leafs need some more physicality. They need some more grit. We saw it with the Brad Marchand hit. Tyler Bertuzzi didn't really do anything about it. A lot of Leafs fans are going at him. Sheldon Keefe called some players out for the lack of physicality. So hopefully he can bring some physicality to the team. And he is 25 years old. He's not really a prospect. He's been in the league for going on 4 years now, since 2020. In the COVID-shortened season, only 6 games, but he's a decent guy, 10 points in 78 games. He's not going to score a lot for you. He's not going to give you too many points. He looked really bad in the preseason after he was injured, so maybe the injury derailed him a little bit, but he's hungry for a spot. He could come in and make an impression and be physical to make an impression, because now is the time to prove to Brad Treliving, to Sheldon Keefe, that a trade is not needed if Simon Benoit could, be that guy. But unfortunately, I think it might not be great, as Simon Benoit hasn't really been good for the Leafs. And then looking at, of course, Lajoie. Lajoie is an interesting guy, and according to Kyle Cushman, Max Lajoie makes a lot of sense. He can slot on the third pair alongside Lagesson, as the two played on the same AHL team last season and have more familiarity than any other option alongside Lagesson. He's played a few NHL games in 5 straight seasons, so he's used to this situation, which is something to point out. I think Benoit is more of a likely guy to be and make an impact and maybe even potentially stay in the team going forward, but at least we have made a couple of moves, a couple of guys. It's nice to have that depth. Obviously, they aren't long-term solutions. I think a trade might be inevitable for a long-term solution, but they're not horrible guys to have on your team, especially when they're down in the system with the Marlies. So overall, it's very interesting. Let me know what your thoughts are on this. Are you happy that he's only a high, ankle sprain? Who knows how long he'll be out for? He's on the LTIR, and we're hoping and praying that he's not out too long. Same with Jake McCabe. Hopefully he's on the way back soon. And hopefully the guys in Benoit and Lajoie can hopefully be decent for the Leafs over the next couple of weeks, or however long they are needed. Now, speaking about the Lilejegren situation, it kind of all flows into each other in today's video, because there was a lot of stuff that went down today. And let's just get into it right now, which is Keefe and Reaves call out the players. So I was only going to include the Ryan Reaves comment because he definitely called out a lot of the Leafs players, but Sheldon Keefe went out and did the exact same thing, so you got to include both of them, and this was the first one. So Reaves called out the locker room. So Reaves, and the lack of response to the Marshawn hit the other night, it was addressed in the room. It'll change going forward. And if you're unfamiliar with what I'm talking about, go check out Twitter, whatever you want to do. Whether the hit was dirty or not is up for debate. A lot of people say it wasn't intentional. Some people say, obviously, with Brad Marchand's history, it was intentional. I'm not going to make an opinion either way. What I do know is that I did not like the response of the team. Ryan Reaves was one of the guys who, was yapping at Brad Marchand, which is good. You saw Tyler Bertuzzi yelling at or laughing at on the bench, which wasn't a good look. He didn't really stand up for him. Max Domi didn't stand up for Lilejegren. And now that he's out long term, on the LTIR, it's looking even worse, and this is probably why the media came at Keefe and Reaves for this exact situation. And Keefe on the lack of response from Rashawn, I hated everything about it. We addressed it. Well, that's a good response from Keefe and Reaves. No one liked it at all. No one stood up for that. You got to stand up for your guys, and that's what I'm saying. Bringing in a guy like Nikita Zadorov, or even a guy in this case like Benoit, could be physical, make an impression. Go battle for your team, especially if you're Benoit, is trying to play for an NHL, contract, or at least being called up with the team and fighting for a spot on the NHL team. If you go out there and be physical, you battle for your team, and you show some heart and grit, that is what the Maple Leafs need right now. And if they're not going to make a trade, then go ahead and do what you're doing right now in the AHL and translate that to the NHL, and what you've done in the past with the Ducks. Translate your game, be physical, and that's what the Leafs need, because ultimately we need physicality, we need grit, we need heart, we need something, because the team does not have it right now. They do not have the it factor so far throughout this season. They have not been physical, they have not been battling. Lots of time left, no need to overreact, but it needs to happen. And he expanded on this a little bit as Elliot Freeman tweeted, Sheldon Keefe, quote, I hated everything about it. And he was referring to the lack of response in the aftermath of Lilligan's injury. Says some may have not noticed what happened in the moment, but players and coaches discussed it yesterday. And yeah, so you have to discuss this, especially given the fact that he's down long term with an injury. Luckily, it's only an ankle sprain rather than an ankle break or an ankle fracture. So that is the glass half full scenario here. The glass half empty is that we had to call up a couple of guys who aren't necessarily NHL caliber, or have not proven to be NHL caliber in the last several years. And this is not the start of the season you wanted for the Leafs. The record's not great. The vibes aren't great. A few of our players are already getting called out, calling out each other in the case of Ryan Reaves. So it's going to be interesting to monitor the situation and just see how, wild this gets going forward, because, who knows? Some are saying Keefe's in the hot seat, and if Keefe is in the hot seat, then he's going to call out his team. He needs to battle for his job. I don't think he's in the hot seat right now. I think that's a bit ridiculous to say this early in the season, especially with how things have gone. It's not like the Leafs are 0-9 like the San Jose Sharks. They're not having a horrible year. They're having an okay year. The injury bug has hit them, but they need to show some heart. They need to show some grit, and they need to battle. And I think they're going to do that. And hopefully Benoit or Lajoie can step up and replace Timothy Lilejegren's grit in their absence, and Jake McCabe for as long as he's out. But that'll wrap up the video. Hopefully McCabe and Lilejegren get healthy soon, as we need some more defense. We need some more moves to happen as the Leafs take on the Sabres tonight with Joseph Woll in net. So that'll wrap up the video. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to hit the subscribe button.